Not everybody has the respect for the other person. It's not uncommon in many countries, which we're not special for that. But if people can have much more of an attitude of the we are one,
Mhm.
then they will do what John Muir suggested. John Muir said, if man would treat this earth the way with the respect he would treat a church, it would be
Mhm.
a much different situation.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Your Lab Central. Today I'm joined with John. John, would you like to tell us why we should be excited about this conversation?
Well, I am the co-author of a book, written and audio book. It's called Channeled Messages of Hope. And the full title is Channel Messages of Hope, Conversations with Some of History's Most Prominent Souls that are on the other side
Right.
regarding where our environment is going. And this book is fascinating because it talks about what's happening with the souls, what they're doing on the other side, how they work with people on Earth, how they try to influence people on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and just in generally how they collaborate among themselves in the afterlife, I guess we could call it. So, for people that are spiritually open, spiritually curious, and have a concern about our environment and where it's going, all of these things, I think there's a lot of strong messages in this book. And the one real unique part of the format of this book is that we used a channeler to be able to communicate with the souls. But in this case, the channeler did something we would call voice channeling.
Mm-hmm.
So the soul would actually come into the channeler, Sam Larkin, who is on the book cover, and would actually take over the persona of Sam, even her vocal cords.
Mm-hmm.
And we did all of these interviews basically on Zoom, like we're right
Right.
now, recording the sessions, and we could actually have direct conversation with the souls through Sam. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a case of we ask a question, then the channeler takes the question and gets an answer, gives an answer back to us. Sam is almost really not present. She's not really involved in the conversation or the content. You can think of Sam in this instance as the internet
Right.
of communications to the afterlife. And we would be able to have direct conversations with back and forth with dialogues. And some of them had real senses of humor. And our audiobook is the actual recorded versions of all
Okay.
of the conversations. And even on our website, www.channeledmessagesofhope.com, there are excerpts of some of the interview that you can hear directly. So I think the content will really appeal to that demographic that I mentioned. The Souls had a lot to say. And, we talk to people often ask, well, how did you decide who to talk to? Well,
Yeah.
my wife, Carolyn, she's the researcher. So what she would do when she first started this, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
after I explain this, we can have some more questions, but I can explain the genesis of the book. But basically, she would do all the research. She would figure out the framework. And she knew that there were a few right off the top that she wanted to talk
Mm-hmm.
to, such as Theodore Roosevelt. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a political book.
Yeah.
Anytime you see something that looks like a politician, it's because they were a policymaker,
Mm-hmm.
very important for the environment. Even Richard Nixon was very important for the environment, believe it or not. We at first didn't, but so anyway, then we would have this interview, and we would typically conclude an interview by asking the soul, who else should we talk to? And
Right.
so Theodore Roosevelt said, well, you have to talk to John Muir. And that makes sense because John Muir was a great conservationist, maybe even preservationist, loved Yosemite, took Theodore Roosevelt deep into the wilderness, and Theodore
Mm-hmm.
Roosevelt ended up being largely responsible for the national park system in the United States. We
Right.
asked Nikola Tesla, who should we talk to? He said Samuel Clemens.
Mm-hmm.
Samuel Clemens, okay, that he was Mark Twain, but it turned out that Samuel Clemens had a very close relationship with Nikola Tesla, who was a
Right.
prolific inventor, because Sam Clemens was a big investor in technology back in his
Yeah.
day.
Mm-hmm.
So, so what we ended up with was, when you look at the 19 souls that we talked to, you have a mix of policymakers,
Mm-hmm.
preservationists, conservationists, technologists, and spiritual leaders like Saint Francis of Assisi and Wayne
Mhm.
Dyer. And all of them have a different viewpoint, especially on many things. But when it comes to the environment and why things are happening and what we can expect. So that's what I think really makes it very fascinating. It's not just a book about, okay, who was working on what inventions,
Mhm.
what new clean energy things going to come forward. It's a much bigger topic than that. And man, individual people, just like you and I, we can
Yeah.
actually make an impact
Mhm.
to improve our situation here on Earth.
So, John, before I get into how you did it, would you like to elaborate on what one common theme came out, or what was something that everybody mentioned?
Well, it depends on the class of the conversationalist. I mean,
Okay.
look, you could talk to Jacques Cousteau,
Okay.
famous oceanographer,
Hmm.
and the oceans are very important in our environmental system because
Yeah.
heat builds up during the day. The oceans take care of the heat at night.
Yeah.
But as we're starting to build up more and more and more heat, and we're degrading the ocean's ability to absorb heat,
Hmm.
now there's a lot of things around ocean
Yeah.
deacidification that need to be done, things like that. But I would rather go all the way over to the spiritual leaders like Saint Francis. And what Saint Francis told us is that the problem, well, first of all, let me read you what Wayne Dyer said. Why are we seeing the extremes of weather? What is the spiritual lesson with climate change? Wayne Dyer says it's a collective guilt for the abuse of Mother Earth, which means common man expects punishment. What St. Francis would say is that we have to have this concept that we are all one, we are all connected. That
Hmm.
doesn't just mean all people are connected. People are connected to the animals, are connected to the earth, which has a soul, to nature, plants, trees. Everything is connected, which means that everything has impact on the other in terms of keeping things in balance.
Hmm.
And there seems to be at least here in the USA, we have a very divided country. At least at this time, we've evolved to. Not everybody has the respect for the other person. It's not uncommon in many countries. We're not special for that. But if people can have much more of an attitude of the we are one,
Hmm.
then they will do what John Muir suggested. John Muir said, if man would treat this earth the way with the respect he would treat a church, it would
Hmm.
be a much different situation. So, different souls had different, perspectives and what they would offer. But the
Hmm.
one from St. Francis, that's the one that really, for me personally, really stuck. The we are one, man is not above the environment. I mean, the earth, the Mother Earth, gives us this environment. It's a
Yeah.
gift to us to live in.
Hmm.
And so if we would take care of that gift, we don't seem to look like we're taking care of the gift very well.
Hmm.
And so hence the earth, and there are technical reasons. And when people say, oh, it's just the weather, I have a response for them on that too. But we've pushed the earth so that it's so far out of balance. It's
Yeah.
having trouble maintaining balance right now.
Now, John, how would you explain this? I mean, there are two things that need to be clarified to, say, non-believers. One is the people who do not believe in the degradation of the environment, the believe people who believe that global warming is a farce, right? And then
Mhm.
there are the others who probably would not believe that something that you did was even possible. So, how do we tackle both of these? How have you? Uh,
Well, let's take there's one group that would not buy into the channeling. They would be very skeptical. We
mhm.
are not here to convince
Yeah,
that what we did is correct. That's why I mentioned early on that the
yeah,
demographic is spiritually open,
yeah.
spiritually curious, has a concern for the environment. If
Yeah.
someone's first take is, well, I don't believe in channeling, well, then this book's not for you.
Yeah.
But I've seen so much now on the channeling side that
Right.
I know that the separation between us and the souls, the difference is we happen to have a human body and we live on the earth,
Mm.
but we
Yep.
also have a soul that's inside of us. The
Hmm.
body over time will wear out and will
Yeah.
go away, but the soul will not.
Hmm.
And then for those that just say, well, global warming, it's just the weather and stuff like that. What I can tell them is that, like one of the people we interviewed, Dr. Charles Keeling, he was the first one that um, determined that the CO2 and the greenhouse gases, the concentration was increasing. Now,
Yeah.
first of all, you need some greenhouse gas in the air.
Yeah.
That's what traps heat. You can't have none. That
Yeah.
won't work. Then we'll be space and it'll be
Right.
very cold here. But the problem what's happened is that the Earth naturally goes through a greenhouse to ice house cycle. And
Okay.
that cycle is usually it's very long. It's
Hmm.
10,000 years long. And we know it happens because samples taken from the ice caps where you can analyze what the atmosphere was at different points in time, you can see it. It's charted, it's real. But what's happened in the last, say, 150 years is that industrial the industrial age, the burning of fuels, fossil fuels, we pumped up the greenhouse gas from all these things that man is doing
Hmm.
so far, so fast that the earth can't deal with all of that. It's so what's happening now is more heat is being trapped. And
Hmm.
because of the same effect is also hurting the oceans can't absorb as much heat in the
Yeah.
off hours. The ice caps also are very important for this. They are shrinking because of the heat, so that's further out of
Mhm.
balance. And then we did other stuff like if you look at the rainforests in
Yeah.
Brazil, those are very important for maintaining environmental balance. But what
Yeah.
happened in previous regimes is they were chopping out the rainforest. Why? To support more livestock. And livestock, dairies and livestock and everything are some of the biggest contributors of greenhouse gases. So my answer is what we've done is we've taken things so far so fast to where the earth just is out of balance right now and it can't recover. And so we're starting to see more and more extremes
Hmm.
in the way of weathers, hurricanes, floods in the east, it's drought in the west, talking about the USA. And the whole key is to give this earth a chance, to stay in balance. And a real good example of this, and the earth can recover quickly. You might recall during the pandemic, when everybody stopped, people just
Yeah.
stopped driving for a period of time. And look at
Yes.
the air. You probably saw this in India, but over Shanghai and Beijing,
Yeah.
boy, the air cleaned up
Right.
very quickly, because the
Yeah.
earth was given a chance. I'm not saying we can all stop our cars, but we can certainly stop driving cars that, create the greenhouse gas and pollution situation. And
Yeah.
that would be a way to help let the earth come back into balance. It's just one example, but
Yeah.
it's a worthwhile one.
Now, I know where to go from here, but what kind of solutions came out? You mentioned one where a thought process was change was required, but what about technological, like you mentioned, Nikola Tesla? So, what kind of things came out from there?
Probably the primary one is what's called nuclear fusion.
Uh-huh.
Most nuclear reactors are fission
Vision, yes.
reactors,
Yes.
which means they produce radioactive waste.
Hmm.
Nuclear fusion is 100% clean.
Yeah.
There is no waste. Now, this is in research, maybe a little bit heading into development stage. A lot of the early work was done by Albert Einstein, but there's over 100 companies working on this,
Mhm.
um, globally right now. It's a very hot topic. There's also some really interesting work going on. One of our other biggest polluters is plastics
Yeah.
in this world, and
Mhm.
um, there's some startups out here where I live that are figuring out how to make plastic materials, but using plant-based, like using seaweeds and things like that. So There's a variety of clean energy, and one trend is that the younger generations here, they really understand the importance of this.
Mm.
Now, I'm kind of more like I'm from Silicon Valley. I've been in tech fields the whole time, but I'm kind of a guy at the end right now.
Mm.
I'm not someone, at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the young people are really getting it. Luckily, there's a lot of investment money that is
Yeah.
going after, like even in my case, a company that I started with a partner,
Mhm.
making a piece of equipment that has a very high sustainability index. And the venture capital firm that was attracted to us was an impact investor
Okay.
because they want to do things that have environmental impact. So we're seeing this trend as well. So, it's you could look at it like, wow, what kind of world do I want to leave for my children?
Yeah.
But one thing I will tell you is um, in what we learn in this book, there's many different things that talk about what happens on the other side. How does
Yeah.
incarnation work?
Mm.
And what is the process? And the basic, I'll just simplify it. This is my
Mhm.
belief system is that we're on this earth to have our set of experiences,
Mhm.
to learn lessons that we need to learn. These could be accumulated over from other lifetimes that we've had. But so now I look at our earth and I think, and I don't think that I'm going to, when I transition, I have a feeling I'll need to be coming back. I don't think I've learned all the lessons yet. So now I'm thinking, what kind of world am I leaving for myself?
Mhm.
A different perspective. Um, so
Yeah.
it's just, it's made me think quite a bit differently about this
Yeah.
whole situation.
Now, this question will become a little more spiritual and philosophical. I don't know. Now, in the Hindu mythology, in the Hindu philosophy, there is the concept of reincarnation, and it's properly documented as to how many stages it takes for a person to come back as a person. Would you like to share how it is, or what you got to know from the other side in your conversations?
Yeah, and I'm not a theologist, I'm just
Mhm.
a regular guy, but what I picked up is that there is no one, at least this is what I learned in doing all this book stuff here with Carolyn. There is no one set of like defined number of, let's say, lifetimes.
Mhm.
So if you have part of the source in you and you have a soul, and you're going to go down and you'll have your earthly experience, you'll have your life, you'll have your whatever you did is what you
Mhm.
do. You'll come back when you transition, that will be reviewed, and then you decide, well, what's my next step?
Mhm.
Sometimes people don't do anything related to lessons maybe they wanted to learn, or maybe they didn't make much progress and they need to come back and try again. How all that works, I don't know exactly how all that works, but we know the souls told us about the review process. And what was kind of fascinating is a couple souls were actually on Earth in a next, in a body on
Mhm.
one of their next lifetimes while we were talking to their soul, because we were interested in the soul of that particular lifetime
Mhm.
of for that soul. So like for instance, John Muir, he was very in tune with, Yosemite and the Sierras, really appreciated nature in a very, in a famous way. He started the Sierra Club. So he told us that right now, as we were conversing with him, he was in a body on Earth in a young, a young teenage snowboarder near a specific lake in Canada, and he described the lake to us. We never heard of this before at all. So we went on the internet, of course, and we looked it up, and yeah, there it was. Something we'd all never heard of before. And you know, that it's things like that that are can be very fascinating
Mhm.
for us. But the book did take some other turns. Like, for instance, when Albert Einstein, who is, the nuclear fusion guy, very well known for the theory of relativity, all that
Yeah.
stuff, his wife, when he was on Earth, Mileva, helped him immensely. She was extremely talented as a physicist, But in that day, in that time, women were not given any credit for work
Mhm.
like that. So her name would not go on the papers or on the works that Albert did. And when we asked Albert who we should talk to, he said, I want you to talk to Mileva.
Mhm.
And what has to learn, what he said, one of his learnings is, about the, getting out of the ego,
Yeah.
sharing the contribution with those who contributed. And they also had a son,
Mhm.
Edward, who had schizophrenia. And so Mileva, when we were talking to her, said she's on Earth now. And
Mhm.
she's a psychotherapist in India, by the way.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
she said, you can call me David, but she specifically works with people who have schizophrenia. That
Mhm.
was her way of wanting to try to give back. So
Mhm.
there's many, many examples like that in this book. It's can be quite interesting.
Mhm. Now, have you tried reaching out to people as to, I mean, you're coming on podcasts like mine and probably going out on the internet. How is the internet taking it? What's the feedback that you get on when you say that, yeah, people from history are talking about it and these souls are saying such stuff and we should be concerned?
Well, it's back to the demographic, spiritually
Yeah,
open, curious, and care about the environment. So, how to reach these people?
yeah.
Uh, and so, what we've done is we also have a podcast.
Hmm.
If you search YouTube, Channel Messages of Hope, you'll see the podcast. And what we've done is we've taken maybe a topic, and there's various souls have a perspective on the topic coming from the recordings.
Hmm.
We've tried to do a lot of, we did some standard stuff up front with Facebook and things like that. It's slow. It's slow going to build it that way.
Hmm.
We try to use other platforms like Reddit. You can get a lot of people
Yeah.
commenting on things like that. But what we're really trying to do is mainly find those people who could use the messages. That's why we did the book.
Hmm.
The book was an inspiration actually of Carolyn,
Hmm.
but the real inspirers were a group on the other side called the Council, who are a group of ascended masters, very influential.
Okay.
We believe Saint Francis is on the council and others. And Carolyn has a special contact on the council that kind of started all this. And Carolyn did a session with this her, let's call him the contact. We call him Baba, okay? But Baba, when Carolyn said, hey, Baba, I had this idea. Now that I know I can connect with souls through Sam, I could actually connect to many different souls and maybe come up with some messages that could just help people on the planet.
Hmm.
And Baba said, well, that's a great idea, but it's kind of it was our idea. And what we want you to do is do that and focus on the environment first, because we
Okay.
see a lot of distress
Hmm.
around the environment right now. And that's
Yeah.
why this first book came out the way it did.
Hmm. Now, so what's the other things that you want to focus on? Are you planning to do this again? What's the next topic that you're planning to focus on?
Carolyn does have a second book, and while it's not completely ironed out, it'll probably be um, souls who had to overcome great challenges over long periods of time in order to achieve the things that made them great, that made them such contributors.
Yeah.
Like one example, I'm sure will be in the book, is John McCain.
Hmm.
Now, people will say, oh, now you're back into politics. No, John McCain is a public servant. And he was in a POW camp in Vietnam for 6 years. He underwent horrors we can't even imagine.
Hmm.
Yet when he came back, he still dedicated his life to public service. And they called him the Maverick. That was his
Okay.
nickname, because he was one that would go his way. He wasn't in there to try to get influence and try to, get close to somebody so that he could get something. He wasn't like that at all. He was pure play, and and from my point of view, an American hero. So he's a guy that had to overcome some
Yeah.
incredible things, and there are others. So it'll be inspiring around that, we believe.
Now, if you had to boil down one message that you want to share with everybody, I mean, we've already talked about so many things, but if there's one life lesson that probably you guys picked up and you can say that, yeah, this would benefit all of general public, what would that be?
Well, I would say maybe I'll have to give it two parts because I might have two. But the first
Sure.
one is the concept that we are all connected, we are all one,
Hmm.
is the most important fundamental. If everyone had that thought process, they would treat everyone, including our world, differently,
Yeah.
knowing we're all connected. And the other thing I found really interesting is that we perceive when someone dies here, now there's a separation, but
Mhm.
that separation is so small. Um, I'm sure, and also the souls on the other side, they are actively working with people here on earth as
Yeah.
guides. I have lots of guides. I know it, and sometimes I ask them to be. I know Wayne Dyer's a guide for me. I know Saint Francis is a guide. I know many others. I don't know all of them because you
Hmm.
don't always know who your guides are because the
Yeah.
guides kind of figure out which humans they can help.
Hmm.
But and there has to be a good vibrational match and some things like that. But I can tell you that there should be no fear of dying because on the other side it's a pure love environment. Yeah, there is life review, and we have to objectively look at our life where we did things that really helped, where we did things that didn't,
Hmm.
maybe where we need to go next. That the separation of those souls that you knew on earth and that now are on the other side is so incredibly, there's almost no separation. That it really struck me.
Now, when you've seen, I mean, when you've conversed with so many souls, how do you look at life materialistically that everybody else is living? How has your perspective changed?
Well, one of the main things is just just use what you need.
Uh,
Sometimes I look at like this is not a judgment per se, but like, does one person need a 20,000 square foot house? And maybe several of them on the earth. I mean, if we took just what we needed, it would really change. And you can have a very comfortable life, and there's nothing wrong with having
Mhm.
nice and comfortable things. Just
Yeah,
try not to be an over consumer. Just
that's true. Yeah.
use what you need. Everything that we have gained from the environment, from
Uh-huh.
the earth, everything. So, if we just treat that with respect, I think we
Yeah.
would all work probably better.
Um, so if uh, so let's talk about the book itself. How would you summarize it for people that are spiritually inclined? What can they look for in the book itself?
Well, the book is organized, by the conversations with the 19 different souls. So,
Mhm.
what you'll find when you read through the book, and you can pick, like you might say, well, I want to read what a spiritual leader like Wayne Dyer has to say. Wayne Dyer, Saint Francis of Assisi, you know, who else do we have here? Oh, and Gandhi, you're going to get a lot of insight into what is happening on the other side and some broader viewpoints of
Mhm.
what these ascended masters think about what's going on here. And then you can flip all the way over and read about the policymakers.
Yeah.
And you'll get stories from them about here's the life lesson I'm learning. Here's an example, nothing to do with the environment, but
Mhm.
Ronald Reagan, who was a president in the United States, very popular one,
Mhm.
he said that his lesson when he goes back, the lesson he's going to work on is to be a much more authentic man. He said that he
Yeah.
usually kind of hid behind an image, which kind of makes sense. I mean, he was an actor and then he became president.
Mhm.
And he said that the lesson for him is to be a much more authentic man and not hide behind the image. He knows the lesson that he needs to come back and work on. And you know, you can look at Richard Nixon. Oftentimes people are curious, why do you have Richard Nixon in there? Well,
Yeah.
it turns out if you read the 1970 State of the Union
Hmm.
address, he talks a lot about the environment. He was the one that
Okay.
started what we have here, the EPA,
Hmm.
Environmental Protection Agency, back when car exhaust, I mean, it was horrible when I was a
Hmm.
kid growing up, seeing what the smog in the air, and that all got cleaned up. That was all started by him. But he said in his life review, what he's learning is that he was a very difficult man to work with. It
Okay.
was he wanted to win and everyone else was going to lose. He would do anything, the hubris and all of this kind of stuff. And so he's seeing in his review that that doesn't work, and he needs to change that. That is not a "we are one" point of view
Yeah.
in the way that the President Richard Nixon was operating at the time. But so
Yeah.
he will come back in another body and get a chance to work on that. And I wish him all the luck too. So you'll get things. You'll also get stuff like, what is it like when you transition? Like Rachel
Yeah.
Carson, she
Hmm.
wrote Silent Spring, which was a book that really brought a lot of enlight. It kind of outed the pesticide companies and what the damage
Okay.
to the environment was of all the pesticides. Well,
Right.
when she transitioned and she kind of came, out of whatever the fog that you're in when you make that transition, she said she was greeted by a million monarch butterflies. And I'm sure that was a sign of appreciation from nature, of what she had tried to do. And also when she was in a body, she died of cancer, and it was a terrible death. It was very painful. And she wants to go back in the next lifetime and be a cancer researcher and see if she can get back that way. So you will learn many different things, but when you kind of piece it all together, you can kind of see how it works. And maybe then people will understand why maybe I have a perspective. Well, I'm not, I want to leave my children a very nice world, but I also may have to come back into this world. So I would
Yeah.
like as good as possible.
Yeah. So thank you so much, John, for all the great messages that you shared with everybody. Before we close, do you want to share any details where people can know more about you or about the book as well?
The best place is, well, your options are, you can go to our website, www.channeledmessagesofhope.com, all one word. If you search that search term on YouTube, you'll find our podcast. We're on Amazon. And you can get it the audiobook as well. I would really, for people that like audiobooks, you'll never have heard one like this, where you get the actual, the channeler, for example, when John Muir, we were interviewing, the channeler is speaking with a Scottish accent. This is a woman that's from California. Or when, Saint Francis of Assisi was talking, all of a sudden she had this very kind of slight Italian accent, but a very, very soft in a sense. So she really would take on the persona, and she would not remember anything of it afterwards. We'd have to tell her what it was like,
Yeah.
because when she's in that mode and the soul is within her, it's kind of full time. These things usually would go 45 minutes or so, because the soul's told us it takes a lot of energy to do these
Yeah.
kind of channeling sessions. So we respected that. But the website, the podcast, and then on Amazon, I
Yeah.
think there's plenty of places there you can get information.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for joining me in on this episode. To the audience, if you liked our conversation, do leave a like. If you have some questions or you want to add to this conversation, the comment section is open. And if you like the content, do leave a subscribe and then don't forget to subscribe again. Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks for joining in, and thanks for the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, audience.